Welcome back to Scratch. I've loaded more or less the same program that we ended with last time. As you remember, you can see a sprite of my own choosing and a grid with a y-axis and an x-axis as stage, and that's it. That's all we've got so far. In this video we will be exploring the code blocks, more specifically the code blocks for motion, for looks and for events. We will start with the events code blocks. It doesn't make a lot of sense that they're not on top, and you'll understand in a minute why I think that doesn't make any sense. So when I select the events code blocks, I see a lot of dark yellow blocks that all have a bit of a bump on top. That means that those blocks will be the start of our algorithm. So they will be the first ones to be programmed. So as you will understand, I don't get why those aren't on top of our code blocks, since those will always be the first blocks we will choose. Now typically a program will start when we click the green flag, or we can choose to let the program start when we hit the space bar or another button. We can choose here which button we would like the program to start with. As you can see, you can choose almost any button there is, or indeed any button, but it's standard set to the space bar. We can also choose to let the algorithm start when the sprite is clicked in the program. That's over here. We can also choose to let the program start when the background changes, or when something is very loud, or when we receive a message. But working with messages is something we will get to in another video later on in the series. So let me drag these blocks in place. When the green flag is clicked, something will happen. When the space bar is pressed, I'm going to activate some code. And when the sprite is clicked. There, for starters. So blocks I drag from the sidebar into the middle are instantly put in the algorithm, or put in the program. So I've got the events that will kick off my algorithm. Let's go to motion. And in motion you can see all the blocks that have something to do with the sprite moving across the stage. There we've got a lot of possibilities. We can move the sprite 10 steps. Steps are always horizontal. We can turn a few degrees. You can choose how many degrees. You can go to a random position on the stage, or you can go to where the mouse is pointing at that moment. You can also go to a fixed position. So you can say I want to go to these coordinates. Or you can glide to a random position or a certain position. That means that you can actually see the motion. You can point in a certain direction, or you can just change the X position or the Y position. So you can go horizontally and vertically. Now let's do some random movements. Let's say that when the space bar is pressed, I want to change X by 10. That means that my sprite will move on the horizontal axis, and let's check it out. So if I press spacebar, you can see that my sprite takes small steps to the right. Then I will make sure that when the green flag is clicked, that my sprite will move to a location. Location on the y-axis will be 0, and location on the x-axis will be minus 146. So once again, I can make him take steps by pressing the space bar, and when the green flag is clicked, he will go back to his starting position. I can also change the position on the y-axis, and that way he will go up as well as forward. And again, by clicking the flag, he moves back again. Now something to think about. Changing X by 10 will move him forward. Changing Y by 10 will move him up. What do we have to do to get him to move to the left or down. Just pause the video here for a moment and give it a go yourself. Moving on to the next part, the looks blocks. In these purple blocks you have access to texts, costumes, given you have already imported some costumes, remember the last video, or you can set your sprite's size to a certain percentage. As you can see here, my sprite is now at 80%. We can also change colors. Let me just drag that into my program and let's see what that gives us. There, you can see that every time I press the spacebar, my sprite's color changes. And when we click the flag, as we're used to by now, we go back. Using text, I can drag this right here where my sprite will give a message for 2 seconds. It says hello in English. However, I like my sprite to be a very European, continental kind of type, so I want him to speak French. I'm making him say bonjour, and when the sprite is clicked, he will say bonjour for 2 seconds. So right now I have 3 events with the blue motion blocks and the purple looks blocks. Now let's get to work with those blocks. Let's remove everything we've got so far and let's start creating a very simple game. I want to do some hide and seek with my sprite, with my little elf. And for starters, let's make sure it's clear what players have to do. So when the green flag is clicked, there will be a message saying, now this is in Dutch, but it says, can you find me? Click me to help me. But that's a bit long. I'm going to split that message over several smaller ones, each appearing for 2 seconds, one after the other. Let's make sure those blocks are connected to the event. As you can see, the long message isn't connected, so it's not part of this event. I'm just keeping it here to be able to copy it to the smaller ones. And I'm adding the message that players can start the game by pressing the spacebar. So we choose the event when spacebar is pressed, and then I will hide my sprite. We'll hide it at a random position and we'll make the sprite really small. Let's see whether 20% is a good size. Okay, 20% will do. Now, of course, in this grid, finding the sprite isn't much of a challenge. Therefore, we will change the stage, change the background, to make it a bit more challenging, a bit more fun. Our sprite is an elf, so I'm choosing a fantasy background. A background where it will kind of blend in, so with lots of purple. There, you have to look for the elf to spot it, so I really like this stage a lot better than the previous one. How does the game end? It ends with the elf being found and clicked, so I'm going to events. When this sprite is clicked, then what? It should take its normal size again, and that wasn't 100, it was 80. And I'm going to put my elf in the foreground, really visible, like somewhere here. To find out the exact coordinates, I will just drag my sprite over there. And the position, as you can see, is -60, -133. Then to make it say thank you, back to the looks blocks. Say thank you for 2 seconds. And let's have a look. You should always test your program in case it still has some bugs. So the goal of the game is explained. Now to press the space bar. Oops, where did the elf go? Oh, there he is. Let's click him. And thank you. Alright, perfect. So now it's up to you. Try and recreate this program. You can rewatch the video if you want to, and then be creative. Try something yourself. Don't forget to save stuff you made to your computer, and I will see you again in the next video. Check out the other videos and don't forget to subscribe to this channel.